From the mountains where blood feuds last forever, he brought the warrior code to Moscow's towers, building an empire where Chechen loyalty met Russian corruption, where violence was honor and money was power. Valery Dzhabrailov was born in 1956 in Chechnya, in the North Caucasus Mountains, where clan loyalty is absolute, where honor matters more than life, where blood feuds span generations and every man is expected to be warrior first, everything else second. This wasn't Moscow's world of bureaucracy and official rules. This was a society where ancient codes governed behavior, where reputation was built through courage and violence, where Russian authority was tolerated when convenient and resisted when necessary. Growing up Chechen meant growing up in culture fundamentally different from Russian society. While Russians respected state power, Chechens respected clan elders. While Russians followed written laws, Chechens followed adat, traditional codes predating any government. While Russians' individualism was subordinated to collective, Chechens subordinated individual to family and clan, but maintained fierce independence from any external authority. This cultural foundation would define Dzhabrailov's entire career. He would operate in Russian society while never fully becoming Russian, would work within official systems while maintaining Chechen identity and connections. The name Dzhabrailov itself carried weight in Chechen society. A family with history, with connections, with reputation that provided automatic respect and also created expectations. Young Valery wasn't just another Chechen trying to make his way. He was Dzhabrailov, which meant representing family honor, maintaining reputation, living up to expectations that failure would shame not just himself but entire clan. This pressure shaped him into someone who couldn't accept defeat, couldn't tolerate disrespect, couldn't allow anyone to perceive weakness. The Chechen deportation of 1944, when Stalin forcibly relocated the entire Chechen nation to Central Asia, killing tens of thousands in the process, was still recent memory when Dzhabrailov was growing up. Chechens had only been allowed to return to their homeland in the late 1950s, and the trauma of genocide remained raw. This history bred deep distrust of Russian authority, understanding that the state could turn genocidal, recognition that survival required maintaining clan structures that could protect when official protection failed. These lessons would influence how Dzhabrailov operated throughout his life, always maintaining Chechen networks alongside Russian contacts, never fully trusting official systems, always preparing for worst. In the 1980s, like many ambitious Chechens, Valery Dzhabrailov migrated to Moscow seeking opportunities unavailable in the Caucasus. Moscow was the Soviet Union showcase, where resources concentrated, where fortunes could be made by those willing to navigate its complex power structures. But it was also a deeply Russian city where Caucasus peoples faced discrimination, where being Chechen meant automatic suspicion, where official opportunities were limited for those lacking Russian ethnicity and proper connections. Dzhabrailov gravitated toward what Chechens in Moscow typically did: trade, commerce, activities where official restrictions mattered less than entrepreneurial skill and willingness to operate in gray zones between legal and illegal. The Soviet black market was where Caucasus peoples thrived, using their commercial networks and willingness to break rules to provide goods and services that the official economy couldn't supply. Dzhabrailov began building connections, establishing himself in Moscow's underground economy, creating the networks that would later support much larger operations. But he also maintained deep connections to Chechnya and to Moscow's growing Chechen community. Chechens in Moscow operated through clan networks, mutual aid societies that provided protection, capital, enforcement, everything that official systems denied them. These networks were extraordinarily powerful, binding members through cultural codes that were far stronger than any Russian legal obligations. To betray a fellow Chechen wasn't just crime, it was violation of sacred codes, dishonor that could result in death, shame that extended to family and clan. This made Chechen networks simultaneously very effective and very dangerous. Effective because loyalty was absolute, dangerous because violations were punished with extreme violence. Dzhabrailov's reputation grew during this period as someone who understood both worlds: Russian enough to navigate official systems, Chechen enough to command respect from clan networks, tough enough to survive an environment where violence was routine and weakness was fatal. He was becoming a bridge between Chechen community and Moscow's power structures, position that would become extraordinarily valuable when Soviet Union collapsed and chaos created opportunities for those positioned to exploit them. When the Soviet Union disintegrated in 1991, Moscow descended into violence as criminal organizations fought for control of privatization opportunities. But among the various ethnic mobs competing, Russian Bratvas, Georgian networks, Armenian groups, the Chechens were particularly feared. They had reputation for extreme violence, for absolute loyalty to clan, for operating with discipline and ruthlessness that other criminals couldn't match. And Valery Dzhabrailov was positioning himself as one of the Chechen community's most powerful figures in Moscow. The 1990s saw Chechen organized crime networks seize control of substantial Moscow territories and businesses. They controlled markets, protection rackets, extortion operations targeting businesses throughout the city. They were involved in banking fraud, oil smuggling, kidnapping for ransom, crimes that required sophistication alongside violence, that combined business acumen with willingness to kill anyone who interfered. Dzhabrailov was allegedly central to these operations, providing leadership, coordination, connections to official power structures that could provide protection. What distinguished Chechen criminals from others was their willingness to go further, to use violence more readily, to view honor and reputation as worth more than money. A Russian criminal might accept insult if the alternative was unprofitable war. A Chechen would fight even when fighting was bad business, because honor demanded it, because clan reputation required it, because cultural codes made backing down from confrontation unthinkable. This made Chechens terrifying opponents. You couldn't negotiate with them the way you could with Russians who approached crime as business. For Chechens, crime was also about honor, territory, and maintaining respect that couldn't be quantified in rubles. Dzhabrailov allegedly built a fortune during this period, acquiring properties, establishing businesses that were fronts for criminal operations, accumulating wealth that would later make him one of Moscow's richest Chechens. But he also built something more valuable than money, a reputation as someone who commanded respect, who could be trusted by Chechens and feared by Russians, who operated at the highest levels of both criminal underworld and legitimate business. When Chechnya fought for independence from Russia in two brutal wars, 1994 to 1996 and 1999 to 2009, Chechen criminals in Moscow faced impossible choices: support independence and face Russian state's wrath, or remain neutral and be viewed as traitors by fellow Chechens. Dzhabrailov navigated this minefield carefully, maintaining connections to both sides, demonstrating that survival required serving multiple masters while fully committing to none. His exact role during the wars remains murky, deliberately so. Some allegations suggest he funneled money to Chechen fighters while officially remaining neutral. Others claim he worked with Russian security services, providing intelligence about Chechen networks in Moscow. Still others argue he simply tried to stay out of the conflict, focusing on business while avoiding political commitments that could destroy him. The truth was probably all of these simultaneously. He did what was necessary to survive an environment where picking wrong side meant death. The wars devastated Chechnya but paradoxically strengthened Chechen organized crime in Moscow. Fighters who'd learned violence in the mountains brought those skills to Moscow's streets. Refugees from the conflict needed support that clan networks provided, and the chaos created opportunities. War profiteering, smuggling through conflict zones, reconstruction contracts. Dzhabrailov allegedly positioned himself to profit from all of this, using his connections to both Chechen fighters and Russian officials to exploit every opportunity that war created. But the wars also demonstrated the limits of Chechen power in Moscow. When Russian state decided Chechens were enemies, official protection evaporated, businesses were raided, individuals were detained. Dzhabrailov survived where others didn't, suggesting he'd built relationships that protected him even during anti-Chechen crackdowns, that he'd proven value to Russian authorities that made him worth preserving despite his ethnicity and alleged connections to independence fighters. By the 2000s, Valery Dzhabrailov had successfully transformed himself, at least in public presentation, from alleged crime figure to legitimate businessman. He owned hotels, restaurants, construction companies, real estate throughout Moscow. He associated with politicians, attended high society events, presented himself as successful entrepreneur who'd built fortune through business acumen rather than criminality. The transformation was impressive. From Chechen migrant to Moscow establishment, from underground operator to respectable businessman. His flagship property was the Radisson Slavianskaya Hotel in Moscow, a luxury establishment that hosted business conferences, diplomatic functions, and high-level meetings. Owning such property provided legitimacy that criminal enterprises couldn't. You didn't just own a hotel, you were hotelier, businessman, contributor to Moscow's economy. The hotel generated legal income that could explain wealth, employed hundreds providing cover for other activities, and served as platform for networking with official and business elites. But beneath legitimate facade, allegations of continued criminal connections persisted. Investigators claimed the businesses laundered money from illegal operations, that Dzhabrailov maintained ties to Chechen organized crime networks, that his wealth's origins were criminal even if current businesses were legal. He denied these allegations, portrayed himself as victim of ethnic discrimination and prejudice against successful Chechens, argued that Russians couldn't accept that Caucasus people could succeed through legitimate means. The truth was probably that Dzhabrailov had successfully done what many criminals attempt but few achieve: transform criminal proceeds into legitimate businesses, create legal income streams that could sustain wealth while also providing cover for continued illegal activities, build public persona so respectable that allegations of criminality seemed like ethnic prejudice rather than legitimate law enforcement concerns. One of Valery Dzhabrailov's most valuable assets was alleged connections to Russian political power, relationships with officials and politicians that provided protection and opportunities. These connections were built over decades, through favors and payments, through being useful when usefulness mattered, through understanding that in Russia, political protection was more valuable than legal innocence. His alleged relationship with Moscow Mayor Yuri Luzhkov's administration was particularly important. Luzhkov's Moscow was notoriously corrupt, with construction permits and business licenses distributed to those with proper connections and willingness to pay appropriate bribes. Dzhabrailov allegedly had those connections, ensuring his businesses received necessary approvals, that his properties weren't subject to inconvenient inspections, that legal troubles disappeared before becoming serious. Whether through direct payments, through services rendered, or simply through being part of the system where everyone benefited from mutual corruption, he'd positioned himself as protected insider. He also allegedly maintained relationships with security services, FSB, police, agencies that could either investigate him or protect him depending on what served their interests. These relationships were mutually beneficial. Authorities got intelligence about Chechen networks. Dzhabrailov got warnings when investigations threatened him. Both sides profited from arrangements that were entirely illegal but utterly normal in Russian system where corruption is standard operating procedure. Political protection also provided business opportunities. Government contracts for construction, real estate deals involving city property, partnerships with state-owned enterprises. These weren't necessarily corrupt in technical sense. Contracts were awarded, work was performed, payments were made. But the opportunities went to connected individuals, to those who demonstrated usefulness to power structures, to people like Dzhabrailov who operated where business and politics and crime all intersected. In October 2006, Valery Dzhabrailov made international headlines when he was involved in a shooting incident at the Radisson Slavianskia Hotel, his own property. The incident began as dispute during a celebration, escalated into confrontation, and ended with Dzhabrailov firing a gun, wounding a senior police official. The shooting was captured on security cameras, witnessed by dozens, and became immediate scandal that would normally end any businessman's career and result in serious criminal charges. The details of what happened vary depending on source. Dzhabrailov's version claimed self-defense, that he'd been threatened, that the shooting was justified protection against hostile aggression. Official versions described it as reckless violence, criminality by someone who thought his wealth and connections placed him above law, behavior that demonstrated continued criminal character despite legitimate businessman facade. What happened next was revealing about Dzhabrailov's position in Russian society. Despite clear evidence, video footage, witnesses, the victim being a police official, the consequences were remarkably mild. He was arrested, yes, but released relatively quickly. He faced charges, but they were eventually reduced. He paid compensation to the victim, and the case was quietly resolved in ways that didn't involve serious prison time. For someone who'd shot a senior police official, the punishment was surprisingly light. The incident demonstrated both Dzhabrailov's power and its limits. Power in that he could shoot a police official and avoid serious consequences, suggesting political protection so strong that even spectacular violence didn't destroy him. But limits in that the incident damaged his reputation irreparably, ended his attempts to present himself as purely legitimate businessman, confirmed what many suspected, that beneath the hotels and businesses was a man who resolved conflicts through violence, whose Chechen background meant viewing honor and confrontation differently than Russians, whose connections protected him from consequences that would destroy others. The 2006 shooting should have ended Valery Dzhabrailov's legitimate business career, should have resulted in asset seizure and imprisonment, should have demonstrated that even connected individuals face consequences for violence against officials. Instead, it became just another scandal in Moscow's criminal political world, briefly controversial then largely forgotten, leaving Dzhabrailov's position damaged but fundamentally intact. His hotel business suffered, some contracts were lost, some partnerships ended, reputation was tarnished beyond repair. But he retained control of properties, continued operating businesses, maintained wealth that the incident didn't seriously diminish. The Radisson Slavianskaya eventually changed management, but Dzhabrailov's real estate holdings remained substantial. His other businesses continued operating, his fortune survived the scandal. The incident also reinforced his reputation in Chechen community. He'd confronted a Russian official violently, had faced legal consequences but hadn't been destroyed, had demonstrated that Chechen honor sometimes required actions that Russians viewed as criminal but Chechens saw as justified. This duality, condemned by Russian society, respected by Chechen community, characterized his position. He operated between two worlds that judged him by different standards, valued different qualities, and had different expectations about what behavior was acceptable. But the shooting also marked the beginning of decline, or at least the end of ascent. Whatever ambitions Dzhabrailov had to become truly respectable, to be accepted by Moscow elite as legitimate businessman rather than Chechen criminal who'd gotten rich, were ended. He would remain wealthy, would continue operating businesses, but would never escape the scandal, would always be the Chechen who'd shot a police official, would be tolerated but never fully accepted. As Ramzan Kadyrov consolidated power in Chechnya, becoming de facto dictator while nominally serving as Russian federal official, every Chechen in Russia faced new reality. Kadyrov expected loyalty from all Chechens, viewed himself as their leader regardless of where they lived, and had demonstrated willingness to eliminate those who crossed him. For Valery Dzhabrailov, this created both opportunity and threat. Opportunity because Kadyrov was extraordinarily powerful, commanded military forces, wielded political influence far beyond typical regional leaders, and protected Chechens who demonstrated proper loyalty and respect. Having Kadyrov's favor meant protection from Russian authorities, business opportunities in reconstruction contracts, connections to networks that extended throughout Russia. Dzhabrailov allegedly cultivated relationship with Kadyrov's circle, demonstrated appropriate loyalty, ensured he was viewed as supporter rather than threat. But Kadyrov was also threat, volatile, unpredictable, connected to numerous assassinations of Chechens who displeased him, including killings that occurred in Moscow and even in foreign countries. Being Chechen in Russia under Kadyrov's era meant understanding that independence could be fatal, that the old clan structures were being subordinated to Kadyrov's personal authority, that survival required accommodation with a strongman who demanded absolute loyalty and delivered violent punishment to those who resisted. Dzhabrailov's relationship with Kadyrov remains opaque. Like most things involving Kadyrov, definitive information is scarce and often contradictory. What seems clear is that Dzhabrailov survived the Kadyrov era, suggesting he'd navigated the relationship successfully, had demonstrated sufficient loyalty to avoid being targeted, had balanced maintaining his own independence with showing respect to Chechnya's new absolute ruler. This balancing act required diplomatic skills alongside survival instincts. Too much independence invited elimination. Too much submission invited exploitation. Throughout his career, Valery Dzhabrailov maintained deep connections to Moscow's Chechen community and to Chechen organized crime networks. These connections were simultaneously cultural, maintaining identity and clan relationships, and criminal, providing enforcement, capital, and opportunities that legitimate Russian systems wouldn't provide to Caucasus people facing ethnic discrimination. Chechen organized crime in Moscow operated differently than Russian bratvas. Russian criminals viewed crime as business. Violence was tool for generating profit, loyalty was transactional, and cooperation with authorities was acceptable when beneficial. Chechens brought different culture. Crime was also about honor and clan. Violence was about maintaining reputation, not just generating profit. Loyalty to fellow Chechens was absolute regardless of whether it was profitable. cooperation with Russian authorities was viewed with suspicion even when beneficial. This cultural difference made Chechen networks extremely effective in some ways. Their absolute loyalty meant they couldn't be easily infiltrated or turned. Their willingness to use violence meant other criminals were cautious about challenging them. Their clan structures provided mutual support that made them resilient even when leaders were arrested. But it also created limitations. Their reputation for violence attracted law enforcement attention. Their inability to compromise when honor was involved meant conflicts that business calculation would have avoided. Their distinctly Chechen identity meant they couldn't fully integrate into Russian criminal world the way ethnically Russian criminals could. Dzhabrailov's role in these networks was as bridge and coordinator. Someone who could interact with Russian authorities and businesses while maintaining Chechen connections, who could translate between Russian business culture and Chechen clan codes, who could operate in both worlds while remaining trusted by both. This bridging role was valuable and dangerous. Valuable because few others could perform it. Dangerous because it required serving masters with incompatible demands and contradictory expectations. Despite scandals and controversies, Valery Dzhabrailov accumulated substantial wealth through decades of operations. His property holdings included hotels, commercial real estate throughout Moscow, residential properties, and business interests in construction and development. Estimates of his wealth vary widely, from tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars. But what's clear is that he became one of Moscow's wealthiest Chechens, someone whose fortune rivaled many Russian oligarchs even if his public profile remained lower. The sources of this wealth are disputed. Dzhabrailov presents himself as a successful businessman who built fortune through legitimate enterprises. Hotels that generated revenue, construction projects that were profitable, real estate investments that appreciated. Critics and investigators claim the wealth originated in criminal activities. Protection rackets, drug trafficking, extortion, that were later laundered through legitimate businesses that provided legal income explaining assets that actually came from crime. The truth is probably that wealth came from both legitimate and criminal sources inextricably mixed. That initial capital came from 1990s criminal operations, that this capital was invested in businesses that generated real profits, that these businesses also served criminal purposes alongside legitimate ones. That distinguishing legal from illegal income became impossible because they'd been deliberately blended. This mixing is characteristic of successful criminal transformation. You don't just abandon crime for legitimate business. You create operations where both coexist and reinforce each other. His properties also serve strategic purposes beyond generating income. They provided laundering mechanisms for criminal money, created employment opportunities for clan members who needed legal income, offered venues for meetings between criminals and officials that could plausibly be explained as business rather than conspiracy, and generated influence through economic importance that mere wealth couldn't provide. Valery Dzhabrailov remains in Moscow, wealthy and relatively low profile, operating businesses while maintaining the connections that have sustained him for decades. He's in his late 60s now, no longer the young ambitious Chechen building his empire but an established figure whose best days are probably behind him but whose position remains secure enough that collapse seems unlikely absent major political changes. His public profile has decreased since the 2006 shooting. Fewer interviews, less visibility, more caution about attracting attention that brings scrutiny. This lower profile is probably strategic, reflecting understanding that in Putin's Russia, ostentatious wealth and public controversies attract unwanted attention from authorities who can destroy anyone when politically convenient. Better to be wealthy quietly than famous and vulnerable. He also faces different environment than when he was rising. The 1990s chaos that created his opportunities is gone, replaced by Putin's authoritarian system where independent power is viewed with suspicion, where wealthy individuals are expected to demonstrate proper deference to political authority, where operating too independently can result in prosecution and asset seizure. Dzhabrailov has apparently navigated this transition successfully, suggesting he's accepted new rules about maintaining appropriate relationships with power, about not challenging state authority, about operating within boundaries that Putin's government establishes. His continued freedom and wealth also suggest that whatever criminal connections and activities he may have had are either ended or conducted so carefully that prosecution is impractical. Russian authorities have demonstrated willingness to target wealthy Chechens when politically useful. Dzhabrailov's survival suggests either that he's genuinely legitimate now, or that his protection is so complete that authorities have no interest in pursuing him, or that he's useful enough to power structures that leaving him alone serves regime interests better than prosecuting him would. What does Valery Dzhabrailov represent in the broader narrative of post-Soviet Russia and particularly of Chechen experience in Moscow? He embodies the contradiction of being Chechen in Russian society. Simultaneously outsider facing discrimination and insider with enormous wealth, simultaneously subject to ethnic prejudice and protected by political connections, simultaneously condemned as criminal and operating openly as legitimate businessman. His career also illustrates how ethnic minorities navigated post-Soviet chaos. Chechens couldn't access opportunities through official Russian channels that discrimination blocked, so they built parallel networks based on clan and ethnicity, networks that operated through different rules and different codes, that achieved success despite official systems rather than through them. Whether this represents entrepreneurial determination overcoming discrimination or criminal exploitation of systemic weakness depends on perspective and values. For Chechens in Moscow, Dzhabrailov represents both aspiration and warning. Aspiration because he achieved wealth and influence that most could only dream of. Warning because his career required compromises, violence, and navigation of dangers that destroyed many others who tried similar paths. His success came at costs that not everyone would be willing to pay, required operating in moral gray zones that many would find unacceptable, demanded balancing incompatible loyalties that created constant stress and danger. For Russians observing Chechen community, Dzhabrailov confirms stereotypes about Chechen criminality while also complicating them. Yes, he was allegedly involved in criminal activities, but he also built legitimate businesses, employed thousands, contributed to Moscow's economy. Reducing him to simply Chechen criminal misses complexity of how he actually operated and what his career actually represents about post-Soviet society's relationship with ethnicity, crime, and wealth. Valery Dzhabrailov's survival for decades in extraordinarily dangerous environments. 1990s Moscow gang wars, Chechen conflicts, ethnic tensions, political purges, criminal rivalries, demonstrates extraordinary survival skills and probably extraordinary luck. Many who started with similar backgrounds and similar aspirations ended up dead, imprisoned, or exiled. That Dzhabrailov survived and prospered suggests deep understanding of how to navigate danger, how to position himself to be valuable rather than threatening, how to balance different loyalties without betraying any completely. Part of his survival came from maintaining respect in Chechen community. You can't operate as Chechen in Moscow without clan backing, without being viewed as honorable according to Chechen codes, without demonstrating loyalty to fellow Chechens. Dzhabrailov apparently maintained this respect despite operating in Russian systems that required compromises, despite making money in ways that traditional Chechen codes might question, despite surviving an environment where many viewed any success in Russian society as betrayal of Chechen identity. He also survived by being valuable to Russian authorities, providing intelligence about Chechen networks, managing clan relationships that Russians couldn't navigate, serving as intermediary when Russian state needed to communicate with Chechen community. This usefulness provided protection that wealth alone couldn't buy, ensured that even when controversies arose, authorities had reasons to preserve him rather than destroy him. But survival also required knowing when to advance and when to retreat, when to demonstrate strength and when to show deference, when to be visible and when to disappear from view. The 2006 shooting damaged his reputation, but he survived by accepting consequences, paying compensation, reducing public profile. He understood that pride and stubbornness kill people in his position, that flexibility and pragmatism enable survival, that sometimes the warrior must bow to circumstances even when honor suggests fighting. Valery Dzhabrailov proved that even in Russian society characterized by ethnic discrimination and systematic barriers to Caucasus peoples, it was possible for a Chechen to accumulate enormous wealth and wield significant influence, but only by operating in gray zones between legal and criminal, by maintaining connections to both Chechen clan networks and Russian power structures, by navigating dangers that destroyed most others who tried similar paths, and by accepting that full acceptance would never come, that wealth didn't erase ethnic identity, that success meant being tolerated rather than embraced. His story is ultimately about contradiction and duality. Criminal and legitimate businessman, outsider and insider, Chechen and Muscovite, honored by his people and condemned by Russians, wealthy and vulnerable, powerful and constrained. He built empire where others saw only obstacles, created opportunities where discrimination should have blocked success, survived where violence should have killed him. Whether this represents triumph over adversity or corruption enabled by ethnic networks depends on what you value and what you condemn. What's certain is that he's one of the few who achieved what many attempted, rising from Caucasus migrant to Moscow establishment, transforming alleged criminal proceeds into legitimate wealth, surviving decades of danger to reach old age with freedom and fortune intact. Whether he actually escaped his past or simply hides it successfully, whether he's genuinely legitimate now or maintains criminal connections camouflaged by respectable businesses, whether his protection will survive political changes or collapse when circumstances shift, these questions remain unanswered. But for now, he endures, wealthy and watching, the Chechen wolf who learned to live among Russian sheep, who built an empire in the heart of a city that never fully accepted him, who proved that sometimes the greatest survival is simply refusing to be destroyed. Valery Dzhabrailov proved that you can bring the warrior code from Caucasus Mountains to Moscow's towers, can build hotels while allegedly running criminal networks, can shoot a police official and survive with freedom and fortune intact if your connections are deep enough and your value is high enough to the people who matter. He came from Chechnya when being Chechen meant facing discrimination at every turn, when Russians viewed Caucasus people as criminals regardless of what they actually did, when success required operating through clan networks that official systems excluded. For 40 years he's navigated between two worlds that operate by completely different rules. Chechen codes where honor demands violence and clan loyalty is absolute, and Russian systems where corruption is currency and political protection is survival. He allegedly built criminal empire in the chaos of the 1990s, used Chechen networks' feared reputation and absolute loyalty to seize Moscow territories, transformed protection rackets and extortion into legitimate businesses worth hundreds of millions. He owned luxury hotels where diplomats stayed and business deals were made, presented himself as successful entrepreneur while investigators claimed he was laundering money and maintaining ties to organized crime. Then in 2006 he shot a senior police official at his own hotel, was caught on camera, had dozens of witnesses, faced charges that should have ended him, and somehow survived, paid compensation, got reduced charges, walked away damaged but not destroyed. The incident proved what everyone suspected, that beneath the businessman facade was a Chechen who resolved conflicts through violence, whose mountain blood demanded satisfaction for insults, whose connections protected him from consequences that would have destroyed anyone without his network. He's still in Moscow, still wealthy, still operating businesses, still navigating the impossible balance between Chechen identity and Russian society, between clan codes and state authority, between Kadyrov's demands for loyalty and Putin's demands for deference. He survived gang wars that killed hundreds, Chechen conflicts that destroyed his homeland, ethnic purges that targeted his people, scandals that would have ended ordinary careers. And he's done it by understanding something fundamental, that in Russia where ethnicity determines opportunity and connections determine survival, the Chechen who succeeds isn't the one who fights the system or accepts it, but the one who operates through it while never becoming part of it, who builds wealth while maintaining warrior identity, who walks between worlds without belonging fully to any. Valery Dzhabrailov, the mountain wolf who built an empire in the city, the Chechen who made it in Moscow while remaining Chechen, the businessman whose blood still runs from the Caucasus where honor is measured in courage and disputes are settled through violence. Proof that you can have everything: wealth, power, influence, and still be the outsider, still be the other, still be the warrior in a suit who everyone knows could become dangerous at any moment.